This guy's mom was an elf, his dad was a demon, so basically his family dinners were awkward. Born with 2 overpowered bloodlines, Richard's got more pressure than a student during finals week. While other kids are learning to walk, he's learning to destroy entire dimensions. His mom sacrificed herself. Cue the edgy power awakening. Got powerful enemies. Good, he needed the XP. The world wants him dead. Tell them to get in line. This isn't just a cultivation story. This is my dad's a demon lord and all I got was this lousy apocalypse. The continent of Athorn is governed by the Holy Alliance Empire, with faith in the moon goddess Alucia as its cornerstone. Yet the narrative shifts as a new continental order establishes itself. Now, divine arts and magic intertwine and circulate, illuminating the empire's prosperity. However, not all power flows within the light. In the darkness of night, a crimson ray erupts from the heavens, coalescing into a sphere of energy. A gathering of mages shields their faces. One shouts, declaring that unorthodox powers require strict supervision and must be forbidden, lest they seep into the world and corrupt mortal hearts. Yet far from the capital's reach, in tranquil corners distant from the seat of power, forgotten secrets and legends concerning the awakening of ancient bloodlines lie concealed. Deep within the forest, a wild boar crashes through the undergrowth, fleeing for its life. Suddenly, a sharp blade strikes its flank. Its agonized roar disturbs every creature in the vicinity. From the brush, the young hunter Richard emerges, his expression eager. He exclaims that the prey has taken the bait, a white grin spreading across his face as he observes the dying creature's final breaths. His triumph lasts mere moments before an arrow descends from the sky, piercing the boar and splashing blood across the boy's visage. Before Richard can comprehend the situation, a larger group of youths rushes toward him. A blonde archer named Pyru appears with his companions, a smirk twisting his features. He loudly proclaims the prize is theirs. Richard flares with fury, glowering at the newcomers and accusing them of theft. The blonde hunter asserts that every witness can attest that he felled the boar. Therefore, it cannot be considered stealing. One of Pyru's companions joins the mockery, questioning if Richard's claim rests solely on a trap. He points out that they observed him earlier with only small snares. Removing the trap from the boar's leg, he declares all skilled hunters know such devices are for catching rabbits. He ridicules Richard, asking how he presumed to capture such a substantial game with such a trivial contraption. Richard retorts with sharp logic. He inquires if that is so, why did they pursue him all this way merely to shoot a wild boar? Pyru's face contorts with anger. He demands to know if Richard is accusing them of shadowing him to steal his quarry. His companion waves a dismissive hand, suggesting they cease wasting words, as Pyru is the undeniable victor of the hunt. Richard refuses to yield, lunging forward and shouting that they have gone too far, that his trap secured this prey. One of the boys snarls, seizing Richard by the collar and slamming him into the dirt. Adopting a righteous tone, he declares Richard a fatherless bastard lacking proper instruction. He tells him not to presume superiority just because he has perused a few books, can scribble some words, and set simple traps. As he pins Richard down, he declares physical force is the sole truth. Pyru glares down with contempt, his visage a mask of wrath as he questions whether Richard dares to resist. Pinned to the forest floor, Richard returns the gaze with unwavering defiance, his teeth gritted as he insists the prey is rightfully his. Enraged by this obstacle, the hunter delivers a harsh kick. He demands to know the meaning of that defiant look, chastising him for continuing to argue. A second kick sends Richard sprawling while Pyru screams the epithet fatherless at him. The bully looms over the fallen boy, demanding one final time if he submits. Yet even as he struggles to rise, bruised and battered, Richard's spirit remains unbroken. He hoarsely insists the prey belongs to him. At the end of his patience, Pyru issues a final, chilling command to his companions, instructing them to beat Richard on his behalf, and stating he will assume responsibility even if the boy perishes. Later that night, under the pale light of the full moon, a battered Richard finally makes his way home, wincing in pain. Inside, his mother sees his bruised and swollen face and asks with concern what happened. Richard tries to brush it off, claiming he just got hurt while catching the wild boar. His mother gently tends to his wounds. She reminds him that while she asked him to hunt the wild boar for his birthday feast, he must not push himself so hard. As she cleans a cut, a soft green light begins to glow from her hand. She tells him to hold still as she uses her healing divine art. The green energy envelops her hands as she soothes his injuries, telling him to just endure it for a little while. She warns him not to push himself so hard again and to be more careful. But Richard, full of youthful pride, insists he is not a child anymore. He is 10 years old now and can take care of things at home. In an instant, the wound on his cheek is completely healed. He smiles brightly, flexing to show he is all right. His mother watches him with a fond smile, noting that he has loved to show off his strength ever since he was small. Her expression becomes more serious as she reflects on how quickly time flies, that her little Richard is already 10 years old. She decides that the time has come to finally tell him a long-held secret, the secret of a special ritual. She pivots towards her son and inquires if he has not always yearned to wield divine arts like his mother, stating she can now instruct him. Stunned by the abrupt proposal, Richard's eyes widen following the recent humiliation. The prospect of mastering divine arts feels like a fantasy. He asks if she is truly serious, his voice quivering with a blend of disbelief and burgeoning hope. His mother grants him a knowing smile as her magic whimsically levitates a teapot. She affirms she could never deceive him, formally offering the power he covets as a gift for his 10th birthday. Richard is ecstatic. He pumps his fists and exclaims it is wonderful, that he is eager to learn. His expression solidifies as recollections of his tormentors surface. He resolves internally that this way, he will not be victimized so readily again. Yet his mother moderates his enthusiasm. She advises him not to celebrate prematurely, clarifying that mastering divine arts is not effortless. She elaborates that on the continent of a thorn, not every individual can employ divine arts. As the church rigorously governs their inheritance, she envisions a grand cathedral. The objective of this regulation is to preserve order. It is to classify non-orthodox powers, like shadows and demons, as forbidden, averting these malevolent forces from jeopardizing the world. That is the reason she discloses that she withheld instruction, wishing to shield him from peril. However, another rationale exists, a fundamental prerequisite for employing divine arts. The essential condition, she declares, is to acquire the ancient language, to become an individual acknowledged by the goddess Lucia. Richard appears bewildered, echoing her statement about the ancient language. His mother explains that one cannot instantly comprehend divine arts. A barrier exists to obstruct wicked powers from seizing them. She presents a phrase inscribed in the ancient script, translating it as power is bestowed upon the truly strong, and vows that as his birthday present, she will teach him everything. Before she can proceed, Richard articulates the concluding half of the phrase in the ancient tongue himself, declaring that a truly strong person must also possess wisdom. His mother glances up, utterly astonished. She gazes at him in incredulity, stammering in confusion over how he could possess this knowledge. She urgently demands to know who tutored him in this ancient language. He merely replies that it was inscribed within a book. Taking a lit candle, his mother guides him into the dark recesses of their home. Within the dusty attic, Richard indicates a book resting inside a mysterious, glowing cerulean circle upon the floorboards. He confirms that this attic tome is the one he comprehended. His mother observes the scene, a gradual smile spreading across her features. She muses that this must be destiny. She informs him that this volume was originally the gift she intended for his special 10th birthday ritual. Richard gazes at the book, appearing puzzled and somewhat underwhelmed, thinking it is merely another text. Yet his mother kneels beside the glowing scripture and reveals its true name. She explains this book is the holy scripture of the moon goddess Lucia, chronicling 7 unique divine arts belonging to her. The ancient language he recently uttered originated directly from these pages. Richard thoughtfully clarifies that while he perused the attic's other books long ago, only recently could he begin to decipher this particular one's contents. His mother elaborates that the text is not something everyone possesses the capacity to understand. Only those acknowledged by the goddess hold the qualification to interpret and employ it. She admits that even she had not anticipated this outcome. She observes her son with newfound awe and declares he has been chosen by Lucia, since the goddess has already recognized him. She states with fresh gravity that tonight will be the occasion on which he completes this special rite. His mother instructs him to kneel and pray, while she employs her divine arts to commence the ritual. She states he will enter the hall of the goddess Lucia to receive enlightenment concerning his destiny. A brilliant golden luminescence envelopes Richard, pulling him into the ceremony. His mother watches him depart, whispering a final piece of guidance to listen carefully. As he fades into the light, she cautions that he will very likely encounter 2 or 3 forthcoming choices. Her voice echoes as he vanishes, advising him to heed the goddess's voice and follow his heart. Richard materializes within a vast, ethereal space, a celestial hall brimming with glowing azure energy and immense crystalline structures. He wonders where he is, standing alone as a minute figure in a shimmering, boundless chamber. Suddenly, a potent voice reverberates through the hall, inquiring if he desires greater power. Startled, Richard looks around, demanding to know the speaker's identity. The voice answers cryptically from the heart of the great hall, stating its identity is not important. It continues, suggesting he can perceive it as the other half concealed deep within his own heart. Richard is shocked by this revelation. All around him, colossal golden statues commence rumbling and glowing, awakening from their slumber. The voice announces the idols of power have all stirred. The 6 towering idols loom over him as the voice commands him to begin his selection. Richard looks on with wide-eyed determination, realizing this is what his mother mentioned. The first choice materializes before him, the divine idol of enlightenment. Then 2 more manifest, the divine idol of restoration and the divine idol of sanction. They are followed by the divine idol of lunar armament and the divine idol of judgment. The final choice appears, the divine idol of foresight. Richard is bewildered, questioning why 6 options exist when his mother cited only 2 or 3. He wrestles with the decision, uncertain what these 6 divine arts truly signify and which one he requires most. In that instant of hesitation, his mind flashes back to the brutal, humiliating beating he endured in the forest. He recalls the agony, the powerlessness, and the burning shame, a memory which hardens his resolve into a single, desperate thought: he must become stronger. He considers his mother's gentle, restorative touch and her anxious expression, yearning for the capability to shield her, his longing culminating in a potent vow to mature into a genuine protector. As he internally affirms this declaration, the Holy Scripture flares open before him. and he finally recalls his mother's counsel to follow his heart's choice. With eyes now glowing with clarity and conviction, Richard makes his selection, stating he comprehends before screaming his decision that he desires wisdom, his voice echoing through the celestial hall as he proclaims he wants the sagacity to become a true man. The mysterious voice responds that it is understood, and following his choice for wisdom. The divine edict points toward a seventh idol, one existing outside the initial six yet at their precise intersection. Beams of light erupt from the six statues, converging upon the platform center as the voice announces the arrival of this seventh idol from the resulting vortex of power. A new, massive, dark, and winged idol begins to materialize, its name revealed as his newfound divine art dark side of the moon. An ancient, ominous message materializes in glowing crimson script, declaring that the world's balance dictates every gain demands a price, the text posing a chilling question for Richard and his unexpected power, inquiring what cost he must pay. Back in the attic, the ritual concludes with Richard remaining knelt, head bowed, as his mother observes with a troubled expression until the calm shatters, a dark, smoky energy erupting from the ritual circle to fill the chamber. Her eyes widen in alarm at the ominous force, and she whispers his name, a bead of sweat tracing her face as she reaches for him, but a shadowy mist ascends from his body. He releases a pained, guttural growl while the dark energy consumes him, causing her to recoil, her face a mask of shock and fear at this terrifying, unforeseen outcome as from the swirling darkness enveloping her son, a monstrous creature woven from shadow begins to form, its sharp claws and menacing silhouette leaving her utterly horrified. In a mysterious space, a single eye reflects a glowing moon, and below, Richard floats helplessly in a swirling abyss of cerulean energy, drawn inexorably toward the light as he drifts within the strange linear dimension until a voice echoes his name, startling him. The voice, revealed to be Richard's mother Elaine, urgently calls for her child as she is struck by the possessed boy and sent onto the attic floor, landing hard on the solid boards where she catches her breath, wondering in disbelief how this could occur during the enlightenment of Lucia, recalling the old adage that a truly powerful individual must also possess wisdom, and questioning whether this violent episode is truly the goddess's blessing. Yet rather than ponder, she leaps into action, charging at the shadow, possessed Richard who looms over her, her hand bleeding as she effortlessly blocks his assault with a shimmering verdant aura. The two locking in a fierce struggle where their powers clash in a whirlwind of green and white energy before Elaine channels her strength to initiate a potent ability, divine technique prediction, unleashing it from a glowing book with a shouted command that plunges Richard into a chaotic void where a dark, broken moon hangs in the abyss, surrounded by terrifying shadow creatures swirling around him, a glowing spectral form of his mother observing and confirming they are indeed shadow beings as Richard falls anew through the darkness while his name is called again. Elaine crying out in agony as she regains consciousness and clutches her head, the ordeal appearing finally over with Richard on his knees, exhausted, and Elaine seated nearby as the ritual's blue wisps dissipate, leaving her to wonder about the experience's meaning. Certain those chaotic creatures have breached the moon goddess's domain, describing the vast cosmology of magic between planes where their own world is merely one of many, countless shadow races wandering these inner spaces, an evil force perpetually attempting to corrupt every reachable plane, its dark power unfortunately already infiltrating the Ethan continent, using the chaotic energy of living beings as nourishment and considering magical power a most delicious feast. Elaine explains their seductive methods twist the minds of magic users, turning devotees of divine techniques into puppets, these fallen becoming spokespersons for the chaotic dark power who spread corruption and harm, recounting a past tragedy where this led to the great priest and warriors failing, blood staining the earth, and an entire civilization ending until a new era's birth. Through the Holy Alliance and Moon Goddess's joint efforts, drove back the invading shadows, finishing her history. Elaine laments she never thought many years later Alucia herself would be contaminated, and now Richard is likely locked onto by those terrifying shadow lives as a coordinate and anchor for their next invasion, becoming a lighthouse beacon in the dark, attracting a swarm of grotesque creatures. Elaine continues grimly, stating if this continues only two fates remain for Richard: utter destruction from violent energy conflict or possession by the most powerful shadow creature, permanently losing control of his body as she gazes out the window at the full moon, her heart heavy with despair, wondering if this is Alucia's punishment and sighing over her lost power, thinking if she were still the great priest the Enlightenment would not have mutated before resolving she cannot let this happen. Believing it is her insufficient foresight that endangered Richard. Filled with new urgency, she frantically searches the room, finally finding in a desk drawer an old scroll tied with a ribbon and a golden quill. Holding the ancient parchment with eyes mix of hope and sorrow. Though 10 years have passed, she prepares for another ritual, her magical energy swirling as she holds the glowing quill to the scroll. Recalling her former strength, thinking the person who once destroyed the elf royal court should manage shadow life, and as golden energy bursts forth she begins a chant, invoking a powerful name, Isaiah Satan Tia Akund, the ritual culminating in a blinding explosion of golden light. Elaine clarifies the incantation's meaning. The burning luminescence signifies this name, inscribed with magic power, has now contacted a fundamental law, transmitting it to the name's proprietor for their perception. She watches, her eyes open and aware, absorbing the potent magic as the scene shifts, transporting them back 11 years to a dark, rocky cavern where a man with dark hair informs a younger Elaine she must survive, that they possess little remaining time, urging her to let him handle the pursuers. The younger Elaine, her pointed elf ears distinct, cries out she cannot permit him to go alone, but he embraces her tightly, interrupting her protest, insisting there is no time and instructing her to take good care of their child. With tears brimming, Elaine listens to his declaration regarding their son's destiny, stating the boy is the future of the Akamond family, a man bearing the bloodline of a demon, and bestows this surname upon him. In their final embrace, he entrusts her with his legacy and a promise for the future, hoping one day she can tell the boy his name as his father, Isaiah Satan Tolia Akand. In the flashback's final moment, Chant unleashes his power and, trusting Elaine with his last wish, tells her to raise him into a true man. Back in the present, Elaine is enveloped by golden light. She addresses her lost love, stating she has dwelled in seclusion with their child for 10 years and never anticipated him and their child meeting in this manner, her own elf ears now visible. She extends a hand glowing with power and calls out to the memory of her husband, declaring she requires him, invoking her past authority to unleash her full power in the name of the great priest. A potent beam of light erupts, enveloping Richard as the divine magic radiates like a beacon from their home, piercing the nocturnal darkness. After the intense ritual, a calm settles. Richard stirs and his mother holds him gently, relieved, as he asks what occurred, saying he recalls seeing the full moon and then everything turning vague. Elaine soothes him, assuring him it is all right now, and as his senses return, Richard notices something startling about his mother's appearance. Elaine smiles gently, revealing her long, pointed elf ears, telling him this is her original visage. Richard attempts to piece together his recollections, remembering he selected wisdom, then the seventh divine statue materialized. Afterward, his impression grew increasingly vague, yet he hazily recalls being transported to another realm, describing it as a strange, ethereal plane pervaded by an oppressive, dead silence where he sat before a colossal moon that imparted a single cryptic sentence, elucidating it was just like the front and back of the moon. He obtained wisdom and the truth behind that wisdom. Puzzled, Elaine inquires about this truth. Richard adds he has never heard of an ability named truth, existing within the Enlightenment. Although his consciousness was somewhat blurred at the time, he remembers this statement with absolute clarity. Elaine listens intently, her expression turning solemn as she contemplates the implications of this new, unprecedented power. A flicker of understanding or perhaps deeper apprehension flashing in her eyes. Richard confirms the internal transformation, stating he has gained a more lucid capacity to comprehend the world. He can perceive his physical body has improved, that he can observe the exterior scenery from the window more distantly and detect movements with greater acuity. Elaine looks down, her thoughts drifting back to Chant's final words regarding their son's demonic bloodline and his destiny as part of the Akamond lineage. She turns back to Richard, endeavoring to settle his mind, telling him he need not ponder so profoundly now and that his safe return is sufficient. Yet there is something she must disclose, capturing his full attention. She states Richard is already 10 years old and possesses the right to know. Assuming she refers to his birthday, Richard smiles playfully, asking if she prepared additional gifts. Elaine's expression grows grave as she introduces the unexpected subject, his father. The word lingers in the air, stunning Richard, who had always believed his father was long deceased. Gazing down at her shocked son, her voice laden with the weight of a decade-old secret, she inquires if he wishes to see him. Struggling to process this revelation, Richard stammers, asking if his father is not gone. Elaine gently confirms the truth he never knew, apologizing for concealing it from him for so long, stating his father has not perished. Tears of sorrow and regret fill her eyes as she requests his forgiveness, explaining too many events transpired in the interim, leaving them no alternative. But if he is willing, she believes he will see him very soon, asserting the person his father dispatched should arrive imminently. Richard observes his mother, his own sentiments churning, and returns her question by inquiring if she desires to see his father. He stands before her, no longer a bewildered child but a youth with clear intent, declaring that if his mother wishes to see him, then he does as well. With fierce resolve blazing in his gaze, he pledges that he too will see his dad. Overwhelmed, Elaine looks upon her son, her heart swelling with affection and pride. A tearful smile touches her lips as she draws him into a warm, firm embrace, her voice thick with feeling as she expresses her gratitude. The instant mirrors a memory from long ago, a fleeting image of her and Chant embracing in an era preceding sorrow and separation. Yet even within this joyful reunion of purpose, a somber thought pervades her mind, considering that perhaps, akin to Chant back then, the remaining time she possesses to shield him is dwindling. A few days subsequent, the scene shifts to their tranquil village, bathed in the warm luminescence of a sunny afternoon where farmers quietly attend to their crops, until the thundering percussion of hoofbeats ruptures the serenity. A laborer halts his work, glancing up from the fields in alarm, wiping perspiration from his brow as he turns to his companion with a troubled expression, questioning who has entered the settlement, his eyes widening in sheer terror at the approaching vision. Heavy cavalry. An entire troop of armored soldiers storms into the diminutive, peaceful hamlet, a spectacle that injects dread into the hearts of the farmers. An imposing figure, the leader of the cavalry, glares down from his steed, demanding an answer. The terrified villager can only stammer in response. Unsheathing his sword, its keen blade glinting ominously in the sunlight, the cavalry leader, a stern man named Modred bearing a scar across his face, points his weapon at the helpless farmer and issues his chilling demand to learn Elaine's whereabouts. Within a rural village, a man is hurled violently into a wheat field by the newly arrived cavalry. The blonde farmer undergoes interrogation from the knights, who seek an individual named Elaine, but the terrified man insists he knows no one by that designation. Other villagers echo his denial, claiming they have never heard of Elaine and that in their small settlement, no person with that appellation exists. The captain of the knights, Modred, remains unconvinced. One of his soldiers reports that their directive definitively indicated this village, asserting the order cannot be erroneous. Modred stirs and contemplates the circumstance, determining a course of action. His horse rears up, casting a fearsome shadow over the helpless villagers, as he declares that if they refuse to speak, his knights will simply have to overturn the entire locale, commanding his men to initiate a thorough search. Yet as the knights prepare to advance, a voice cries out from a distance, instructing them to halt. A mysterious woman in a white hood emerges from near a dwelling, calmly stating she is present. The villagers are stunned, recognizing the woman as Elaine and wondering with dread why the knights pursue her. One knight, misunderstanding the situation, orders Elaine to stop and not take another step, but another hand extends to halt the knight's arm. It is Captain Modred, who reprimands his subordinate, telling him not to be discourteous. The scene briefly transitions to a peaceful vista of the village and Elaine's home as a horse gallops toward her. In a startling turn, Modred dismounts and kneels before Elaine, introducing himself as a knight of Lord Chant. Present by his lordship's command, with his head bowed, he declares they have come to escort the madam back. Hearing the commotion, the other villagers begin rushing toward the scene to discover the occurrence. A village boy, Peru, hastens forward as the crowd buzzes with gossip, questioning if Elaine committed an offense and speculating that her name might not even be Elaine. Pyru pushes through the gathering, shouting for everyone to scrutinize Elaine's appearance closely. His eyes widen in sheer disbelief and shock as the crowd comprehends the truth. The secret is exposed. As Elaine draws back her hood, revealing her long, pointed ears, the assembly realizes she is an elf, and beside her stands her youthful, white-haired son Richard. Elaine, whose true name is Elaine, turns to her son, informing him that the individual he most desires to greet is not her, and introduces him to Knight Modred. Modred bows his head profoundly, not to Elaine, but to the young boy, Richard, expressing his pleasure in meeting him and pledging his service. The villagers are utterly stunned by this development, unable to believe that not only is Elaine an elf, but the formidable knights are bowing to her son, leaving them to speculate about their genuine and evidently noble identities. Among the astonished crowd, Peru is rendered speechless, his perception of his quiet neighbors completely shattered by the improbable scene unfolding before him. With the truth revealed, Modred announces it is time to depart, stating Lord Chant eagerly anticipates their arrival. Setting the journey into motion, Elaine confirms she is prepared to leave. Young Richard, appearing worried, calls out to his mother. Elaine reassures him, holding his hand and telling him it is all right, promising the knights will not harm him, her expression a blend of affection and somber resolution. With a sorrowful smile and a tear escaping her eye, she reminds him of their promise to go see his father. The moment is bittersweet, a symbolic release, a solitary droplet falling from their hands as they part, signifying a final tragic farewell. Meanwhile, the knights establish a perimeter around the area, shouting orders for everyone to step back and prohibiting any departure from the village. Captain Modred announces that this lockdown will persist until his troops have vacated the vicinity. Modred observes as the procession commences movement, his face stern and inscrutable. Richard is situated on a horse with a knight, and they begin riding away from the settlement. In his thoughts, Modred confirms the boy's identity as the son of Lord Chant as he gazes upon the youth. Modred's internal monologue completes the thought that Richard is the heir to the Akamon family bloodline. Just as they commence their departure, a knight frantically rides up, shouting to Captain Modred that a grave irregularity has occurred. The knight reports Madame Elaine has vanished. Richard and Modred both pivot back in shock, while the knights express confusion, explaining she was supposed to be within the carriage. One clarifies she claimed to have forgotten an item and returned, but the soldier shadowing her lost her in a sudden, powerful gust of wind. The panic escalates as another soldier arrives with terrible news the village is ablaze. From the rear of the procession, the villagers cry out in terror, pointing toward the source of the inferno, Ellen's house. The final horrifying report comes from the rear guard. Madame Elaine returned to her dwelling and immolated herself. Richard and the knights gaze back toward the plume of smoke in absolute horror. The word no escapes Richard's lips as his mind struggles to process the catastrophic revelation. Pure instinct seizes control. Screaming in denial, Richard hurls himself from the horse and attempts to sprint back toward the flames, but he is swiftly intercepted by the knights. Richard is thrown to the ground as the men struggle to restrain the grief-stricken boy. He fights against them with all his might, screaming to be released, crying that his mother never indicated it would conclude this way, tears streaming down his face as he continues to resist Captain Modred. The captain holds him fast, his face grim, and yells at Richard to compose himself, declaring the tragic end was the madam's own deliberate choice. As the fire rages, Modred's internal narration describes Elaine's sacrifice as a pure and courageous act. A silhouette of Elaine stands defiantly within the flames, willing to incinerate her life to ash to safeguard what she cherished. Modred calls her a woman truly worthy of Lord Chant. While Richard weeps and reaches toward the conflagration, the captain tells him not to disappoint her expectations or invalidate everything she has undertaken for him. The scene flashes back to a quiet night, under a full moon, where Elaine informs a younger Richard they will soon depart his birthplace. Richard inquires why she waited until after his 10th birthday to disclose his father is alive. Stroking his hair, Elaine explains there existed no alternative. She confesses that due to her own negligence, a terrible incident transpired, and the sole solution is to request his father's assistance. When Richard asks how they met, Elaine averts her gaze. Stating their story is excessively complex, she reveals that potent forces and intricate issues compelled them into concealment under assumed names, and only a recent ritual forced her to revert to her original elven appearance. As Richard admits his shock, Elaine grows somber, stating she retains little magic remaining and her illness will only deteriorate. Richard's eyes widen in alarm as he processes her words and asks if she is unwell. Elaine confirms his fears, grimly stating the malady cannot be overcome, and that one party must make a sacrifice. She observes him sadly, stating that after delivering him to his father, she will need to leave him for a period to cure the illness. Richard immediately protests, but Elaine gently tells him not to be willful, reminding him this is for his benefit and he must be obedient for her to recover swiftly. Devastated, Richard can only stammer. Elaine gazes at her son with love and resolve, pulling him into a final embrace, telling him to remember that no matter where he journeys, she will remain by his side. The flashback concludes, returning to the brutal present, where Richard lies unconscious in the rear of a hay cart, having been rendered insensate by Modred's men to quell his frantic distress. Modred orders the carriage to depart first, instructing his knights to safeguard Richard at all costs. One knight questions the propriety of incapacitating Lord Chant's child, but Modred coldly replies there existed no superior alternative. The knight then inquires regarding orders for the village. Modred issues a chilling command. A minor contingent of women is to be permitted escape to disseminate news of the madam's demise. Asked about the remaining villagers, his countenance darkens as he clarifies Lord Chant desires no further individuals aware of the child's location. The implication is unequivocal and brutal, with the settlement ablaze behind them. Modred's soldiers deliver the final horrific directive: seal the village and exterminate them all. The knights execute the command without hesitation. The once tranquil hamlet transforms into a tableau of slaughter as the remaining inhabitants, including the youth Piru, are mercilessly cut down. As the massacre unfolds, the scene transitions back to Elaine's voice from the earlier recollection, where Richard had inquired what manner of person his father embodies. Her response is simple and terrifying: a madman. She reveals his history. A decade prior, Richard's father, Chant Akamond, single-handedly obliterated the elven royal court within the Evernight Forest, an act so cataclysmic it unsettled the entire Holy Alliance. She confesses she has received no tidings of him for years, but has heard he has since attained the rank of Marquis, and now dwells in a place ominously named Black Rose Castle. Some time later, Richard groans, rousing from his forced slumber. The day's trauma has extracted its toll. His eyes snap open. The final word he recalls uttering is mother. He sits up, dazed and disoriented, within a luxurious, unfamiliar chamber where a warm fire crackles in a sizable hearth. He clutches his head, endeavoring to assemble fragmented recollections, recalling only being restrained upon the ground and then oblivion, before the full, horrifying memory inundates him: the conflagration and his mother's sacrifice, his eyes widening in panic and grief. In a frantic surge of adrenaline, he leaps from the bed, shouting for his mother, resolved to locate her. As he stumbles, an abrupt knock at the door halts him. Startled and on edge, he calls out. Gradually, the large, ornate door creaks open, revealing a young maid with lengthy, light brown hair who calmly notes he is awake. She informs him she has arranged his attire and that he ought to bathe and change. Richard is flustered, suddenly conscious he is merely in his undergarments and feeling entirely out of place. He panics, asking why she possesses his old garments. The maid simply directs his attention toward the fresh ensemble, indicates the bathing area, and disregards his outburst, instructing him to cleanse himself thoroughly, her tone professional and detached, adding that his lordship awaits him before she pivots to depart. Richard repeats the phrase his lordship, the reality of his circumstance and the individual he is poised to encounter beginning to permeate his awareness. After bathing, he attires himself in unfamiliar, superior, quality garments. Now clad as a youthful nobleman, Richard appears a world removed from the village boy he was mere hours prior. He surveys the expansive room, thinking only that the location is colossal. The perspective focuses upon a golden candelabra, an emblem of the immense affluence and authority now enveloping him. He proceeds anxiously through the grand, intimidating corridors of Black Rose Castle. With a profound breath and a determined, albeit apprehensive expression, he advances toward the main hall to confront his destiny. Arriving at the bottom of a grand staircase, where from the darkened landing above, a calm, commanding voice rings out, stating they have finally met as a man emerges from the shadows, revealing an imposing figure with striking black and white hair and a crimson rose upon his lapel. His father, Marquis Chant Acamond, who gazes down and addresses the boy by his full noble name, Richard Acamond, his bloodline. The scene opens upon a lavishly illuminated dining hall, viewed from the quiet obscurity outside a substantial window. Inside, an individual dines, their hands elegantly sectioning a portion of meat upon a porcelain plate where the youthful, white-haired Richard consumes a morsel of food that is literally aflame, while a voice from across the table remarks that while existence possesses hardships, one should always retain a passion for superior cuisine and drink, something Richard's mother, Elaine, frequently expressed, adding Richard's disposition is remarkably similar to his mother's. At the mention of his mother, Richard's expression darkens, a flicker of turmoil within his eyes as he chews, and the speaker is revealed to be Lord Chant, who informs Richard that Elaine executed a great sacrifice for them both, protecting Richard and preserving Chant's own identity before addressing the boy by his complete name, Richard Acamond, which angers Richard, who slams his palm upon the table and shouts that his name is merely Richard, repudiating the surname, to which Chant calmly retorts that regardless of Richard's admission, Elaine never bestowed the name Munong upon him, so his surname remains Acamond, continuing to elucidate that Elaine ultimately entrusted Richard to his guardianship and that, irrespective of her statements regarding his origins, the blood of the Acamond family circulates through his veins, as Chant elaborates that this lineage belongs to the Acamond nobility, which exists beneath the current Holy Alliance Empire, recounting their history where the Acamond family should possess a Grand Duke rank. But owing to their madness, they were decimated by other noble houses, becoming a persistent nuisance. A lower-class family that disregards etiquette and regulations. Altering the subject, Chant mentions that within the perspective of the old noble families, there exists a formidable figure who relishes consuming raw flesh, and as he commences slicing a segment of uncooked meat, a close-up displays the knife penetrating the blood, red raw tissue. As Chant discloses this individual demands flesh be excised from a living body and ingested within an hour, recognized as Philip the Bloodthirsty, with Richard observing in horror as a menacing crowned silhouette flashes upon the screen, while Chant clasps a scarlet rose, his expression sinister, as he continues his dark narrative, explaining such a man is somehow publicly acknowledged by the Empire as the epitome of a genuine nobleman, and inquires of Richard if he comprehends why. Delivering with a chilling smirk, blood dripping from his mouth, as if he had bitten the raw meat, the shocking revelation that Philip the Bloodthirsty is none other than His Majesty, the paramount emperor of the Holy Alliance Empire, who commands the Empire's forces, and yet the ancient noble families all fawn over him, leaving Richard completely stunned, unable to process that the cruel sovereign ruling their empire is this monstrous entity, which Chant explains is why the Acamond family has become the insane and hazardous outsiders everyone discusses, stating that since Richard has inherited the Acamond surname, he too must unfortunately become formidable and potent, leading Richard to finally comprehend his father and mother executed sacrifices to resist this oppressive rule. But when he quietly asks if their objective is resistance, Chant scoffs and declares he simply refuses to submit to being governed by such refuse. Looking down upon the boy, he tells the 10-year-old he thinks of the world in far too simple terms and delivers a chilling warning when Richard truly understands the truth. He might discover the person closest to him is no different from the bloodthirsty emperor. Their conversation is interrupted by an aide who reports that spies from other noble families, an organized group of over 100 commoners, have been captured in their territory. Without hesitation, Lord Gotan orders their disposal regardless of status, commanding that no one be left alive. Richard looks on, shocked by the casual brutality. After the aide confirms the order, Gotan turns to a woman with long blonde hair nearby, informing her that as Richard's older sister, his life in the castle is now her responsibility, which she solemnly accepts. In shock upon realizing he has a half-sister, Richard stands desperately, asking Gotan what his mother truly meant to him. Gotan pauses, his expression unreadable and cast in shadow, then delivers a heartless blow, stating flatly that Elaine now means nothing. Richard is visibly crushed by the cold dismissal. Gotan continues, explaining that Elaine's final request was to entrust Richard to his care, placing her hopes in him, but he coldly states he has no interest in fulfilling her wishes and warns it will not be easy. As Richard trembles with suppressed rage, Gotan tells him that even though he is in his care, he will not be helped directly nor granted power. Walking away, Gotan tells Richard that to escape his predicament, he can only rely on himself to seize the opportunities that will be provided. The scene shifts to a memory where Richard once asked his mother if, after so many years, she still loved his father. She replied that she did and hoped Richard would be able to like him too when they finally met. This memory now fuels his present anger, and his inner voice screams with conviction that he hates him. The narrative then follows a journey, signaled by horse hooves pounding against rocky, snow-dusted ground. Gotan's aide, a man with a prominent scar, leads the way, announcing they are almost at their destination. 2 days later, they arrive at the breathtaking, glowing citadel of Deep Blue, the magic tower city that is Richard's arranged training ground. As they approach a tower glowing with intense blue light and swirling magical energy, the aide informs Richard his new mentor is inside. Richard is awestruck by the legendary floating city, marveling at the gleaming crystalline structures and the magic users in robes and pointed hats, thinking he has only ever seen such things in his mother's books. Lost in awe, he hears Gotan call out to a figure for old time's sake, instructing him to diligently teach the young master. The figure, Richard's new mentor, turns and scoffs, immediately complaining that the Marquis still owes him for materials. Gotan retorts that the principal is paid, but they refuse to acknowledge the exorbitant interest, cutting him off and insisting the mentor is well aware of the new student's identity, background, and extraordinary magical talent. The mentor remains unmoved, refusing to work for free and boasting about turning down magical geniuses yearly, declaring he must first inspect the goods, leaving Richard to wonder what an inspection entails. The scene establishes a core tenet of this magical world: arcane power is an exclusive gift bestowed upon those born with exceptional constitutions or specific bloodlines, identified exclusively through a spring of assessment in deep blue. An assessor directs everyone to line up for their results, while a man screams in agony during his own trial. Results are called out as white entry level, and gossiping female assessors observe no impressive candidates have emerged. Meanwhile, Madrid reassures a nervous Richard that his turn approaches soon and he must endure the process. As the 77th tester is announced, Richard walks forward to jeers from the crowd, mocking his simple attire and youthful appearance. Standing within the spring's center, he is instructed to accept the trial. Magic surges violently around him, causing him to grit his teeth in acute pain as it impacts his entire being. Watching from the sidelines, Madrid and other loyal retainers shout for their young master to persevere, their allegiance clearly demonstrated. A memory of chance words, to fight fiercely for the opportunities given, echoes within Richard's mind, hardening his resolve not to be viewed with contempt. The assessors observe in mounting shock as Richard endures for over 10 minutes, and a blonde assessor then declares the grading result: Gold Advanced level. However, a close-up on Richard's eye reveals a sinister hint of crimson as a profound transformation begins, signaled by a blood-red moon overlay. Richard releases a horrifying scream as the radiant golden energy corrupts, mixing with a dark, shadowy power. The system flashes a dire warning of an unidentified anomaly, plunging all onlookers into panic over the unprecedented black energy. Madrid stares in profound shock, recognizing the manifesting shadow creatures and recalling a pivotal flashback where Elaine explained her need to contact Chant for aid despite the inevitable trouble, beseeching him to protect Richard at all costs. Concluding the memory, Madrid kneels and pledges his very life to the cause, vowing to safeguard the young master. In the present, without hesitation, he leaps into the swirling vortex of dark energy to rescue Richard, striking desperately at the shadows but meeting overwhelming resistance, gritting his teeth as the sinister energy consumes him. He realizes his mortal human body cannot break through this barrier. As chaos erupts, a female assessor panics and urgently calls for backup, while another announces that the legendary mage has already been summoned to manage the grave situation now unfolding before them. With Madrid being overwhelmed, a powerful voice commands everyone to move aside. The legendary mage Sue Helen descends with flowing pink hair and unleashes a blinding blast of magic that cuts through the darkness. She notes Richard, the boy from the bloodline Gotan entrusted to her, is being targeted by shadow creatures and declares him the chosen child. Striking down a monstrous shadow creature, she stands amidst the dissipating shadows, confirms Richard's name, states he has passed the quality inspection, and declares him qualified to become her student. The scene transitions to a quiet night over the Magic Academy. Richard is lost in a terrifying dream of an inferno, seeing two silhouettes in the flames and desperately calling for his mom. A vision of his mother turns and reaches out, calling his name before he jolts awake in an unfamiliar room. An old man with a long white beard and wizard's hat tells him not to be afraid, introducing himself as the primary magic instructor appointed by Sue Helen. Richard is baffled, having no memory of the mage or events after starting the test. The instructor advises him not to force recall, reassuring him everything is all right now. Awake but dazed, Richard looks around for Madrid. Meanwhile, Sue Helen analyzes his assessment results, noting his lack of elemental talent but excellent mental strength inherited from his mother, and muses that his balanced abilities with no clear strengths make the shadow creature's targeting puzzling, concluding it must be due to his Akamond lineage. Turning to Madrid, she informs him Richard's treatment is complete and cryptically asks if he knows the ultimate fate of a mortal body resisting shadow power. With unwavering resolve, Madrid states his duty is to protect Richard no matter the circumstances. Sue Helen presses further, asking if his duty extends to sacrificing his own life, seeming surprised by his loyalty. Changing subject, she coolly presents a bill for 116,000 imperial gold coins for the testing and treatment. Madrid calmly asks to put it on a tab, enraging Sue Helen, who snaps and says that she is not running a charity. Madrid then reveals Lord Gotan is willing to discuss her earlier price, instantly shifting her demeanor to a greedy, excited grin as she muses that they are actually willing to offer those terms for the child. Madrid explains the gravity the shadow power is dangerously eroding Richard's life, and keeping him by Sue Helen's side is the only method to suppress it. Realizing her upper hand as the unique suppressor of shadow power, Sue Helen demands the revenue from one of Gotan's two planes, clarifying she means Norland time. Madrid argues her conditions exceed Gotan's bottom line, prompting Sue Helen to issue a veiled threat about not guaranteeing she can teach Richard to resist the shadow power in the future. Sighing at her reputation as a money grubber, Mordred agrees to discuss it with the Marquise but hopes for more value to ensure the deal. Sue Helen pretends to concede, offering revised terms. At the next prayer ceremony at the Eternal Dragon Temple, she will provide Richard with special assistance. Mordred accepts her promise and says he will seek the Duke's permission, formally leaving the young master in her care as he departs, to which she cheerfully responds, looking forward to his reply. The scene transitions to the exterior of a grand tower at night. Inside, Richard rests peacefully before stirring with a pensive expression, his eyes snapping open as fragments of traumatic memory flash through his mind. A chaotic scene, a castle against a blood-red moon. Sitting up, he questions if the experience was the real world, feeling both real and illusory. As he contemplates, a strange glowing card covered in what appears to be binary code materializes in his hand. Richard rubs his eyes in disbelief, trying to make sense of the strange sight and wondering if he is just seeing things, but it is not an illusion. He lets out a sharp gasp as a blue swirling light suddenly activates in his eye, bringing the strange phenomenon into focus. His shock turns to panic as he realizes the strange digital interfaces are not just in front of him, but are appearing on the walls as well. He looks across the room, and the phenomenon is everywhere, even covering the chest and the weapons resting against the wall. Overwhelmed by the sensory overload with binary code flooding his vision, he cries out in desperation, asking what is happening to him. The feeling intensifies, making him feel as though his entire world and very perception is shattering. He collapses to the floor, screaming if it is broken. Trying to get a grip, Richard makes his way to a wash basin and stares at his reflection, his glowing blue eyes staring back from the water. He splashes the cold water on his face, the sensation grounding him as he tries to process the impossible situation. He tells himself to calm down, confirming that the vivid experience feels all too real and that this is not a dream. As he catches his breath, he becomes aware of a clear, sharp sensation throughout his body, a new level of awareness. He flashes back to his initial awakening, realizing he can feel that his body has improved significantly. He can see the scenery outside with greater detail and hear distant movements with perfect clarity, and he realizes with a jolt that it is the same feeling he had back then. With his glowing eyes fixed forward, a new thought occurs to him that perhaps these strange numbers hold some kind of meaning. He begins to focus on the data streams, looking at a wall lamp and a coat rack. The numbers seem to correspond to concepts like size and quantity. He then shifts his gaze to the bedside table and the data stream clarifies further, now presenting a query about its material as the content of the data becomes clearer. Focusing on the sword and shield in the corner, the data resolves into specifics. He can see the material, length, and hardness of the iron sword along with the material, diameter, and hardness of the wooden shield, realizing in awe that he is seeing complete data. A look of stunned amazement is on Richard's face as he processes the incredible implications of his newfound sight. The realization hits him fully that his eye, now a complex web of data itself, has given him an extraordinary gift to see through to the very essence of objects, with this new ability revealed to be the power of truth. As Richard stands silhouetted against the moon, his world forever changed, the sudden influx of information becomes too much. Richard cries out as an immense pressure overwhelms his mind, forcing him to his knees. He clutches his head in agony as the power triggers a painful flashback, remembering that fateful time and the terrible choice he was forced to make. The scene fades to the dark exterior of the castle spire, leaving Richard to grapple with his newfound power and the trauma it has unearthed. Sometime later, a knock is heard at the door of Richard's room, and a voice calls out for student Richard. Inside, Richard is seen lying exhausted on the floor after the ordeal with his new power. Lying on the floor, Richard hears the voice of his new teacher, Popovich, telling him that he cannot be late, for today is the beginning of his magic study life. Now dressed in new clothes, Richard follows his teacher through the sunlit grounds of what appears to be a magic academy. He looks around, slightly confused, seeing other students in robes greeting their own teachers and heading towards a large building, prompting him to ask Teacher Popovich if they are going to the classroom. Pointing towards the other students, Richard asks if their classroom is in the main building. Teacher Popovich explains that Richard is not yet old enough to attend class with them, and that, as it is his first day, he will be receiving special individualized instruction. Teacher Popovich then reveals that it was the legendary mage Sue Helen who personally instructed him to teach Richard properly. He gestures for Richard to follow him. Richard follows but becomes confused when they stop at a small ordinary-looking pavilion by the road. He questions if this could possibly be their classroom, to which Teacher Popovich simply lets out a knowing chuckle. With a gentle and mysterious smile, the old teacher simply advises his new student to be patient, saying they will arrive soon as he touches his finger to a magical glowing clock face that has materialized in the air, indicating the use of powerful spatial magic. Richard is left speechless, bathed in the golden light of the spell, completely amazed by the incredible display of magic happening right before his eyes. They step through the magical portal, arriving within what appears to be a magnificent, sprawling library where Richard's specialized one-on-one magical instruction is poised to commence. Following his new instructor, Richard is informed they have reached their destination. He is rendered speechless, his eyes widening in astonishment as he absorbs the sight of the grand, ornate hall before him. A figure in a wizard's hat and robe materializes, welcoming Richard to the mirror classroom and introducing himself as the primary magic instructor. He formally presents himself as Teacher Popovich and declares their inaugural magical class now officially begins. The first lesson concerns how to perceive the magical world. Popovich commences by elucidating the concept of a primal force, the fundamental foundation upon which all things are constructed. The instruction delves into cosmology, explaining that within the chaotic expanse of existence, numerous distinct planar worlds coexist, each governed by its own unique set of laws. Popovich elaborates that these laws constitute the very framework of the entire reality, and the plane upon which they currently stand, the continent of Norland, is a high, level plane. To demonstrate, Teacher Popovich conjures a flame in his palm, a tangible manifestation of the magic intrinsic to their world of Norland. He positions himself before a massive, intricate clock, clarifying that for those who observe the magical world solely with their naked eyes, its existence is accepted as a given. Richard's gaze is wide with a blend of intense concentration and wonder as he strives to internalize the profound concepts being conveyed. Popovich continues, stating that when an individual's consciousness ascends to a superior perspective from which to observe the world, what one genuinely perceives and hears is not reality. Much like the mirror classroom they inhabit, the world's appearance is merely a protective illusion, a perception fabricated within one's own consciousness. Richard is evidently overwhelmed, muttering the intricate terminology to himself as he wrestles to comprehend the mind-bending lecture on planes, laws, and the illusory nature of observation. Sensing his perplexity, Popovich explains that the legendary mage herself insisted he teach Richard the unvarnished truth without indulgence, as this profound knowledge is indispensable for his future. The lesson concludes with a homework assignment for the subsequent 3 months. Richard must design his own magic array composition, a critical initial step toward mastering the laws of their world. Richard is taken aback by the task's immensity, stammering at the notion of creating his very own magical array, yet his shock rapidly transforms into resolve. Acknowledging his teacher, Richard becomes determined to forge magic that authentically belongs to him. 2 months later, a powerful magical energy commences swirling and coalescing under the night sky. A hand moves with practiced grace, channeling potent arcane forces into a complex pattern. The spell is cast by Sue Helen, a formidable mage with distinctive pink hair who is encircled by the brilliant luminescence of her magic. Figures bow in deference as they welcome the return of the legendary mage, Sue Helen. Her excursion to collect debts had consumed nearly 2 months. Upon her return, Sue Helen is immediately briefed regarding an urgent commission concerning suspicious monster activity. Yet she inquires if any other notable events transpired during her absence. She dismisses the low-paying commission and turns to Popovich, promptly demanding an update on Richard's progress. Popovich praises Richard's exceptional comprehension skills, presenting scrolls to Sue Helen, who is astonished to observe he has already commenced crafting his own magic array composition, a task she presumed would require significantly more time. Popovich proudly declares Richard did not disappoint her, elucidating his unique aptitude in merely 2 months. His latest magic array already exhibits incredible stability with an error margin of less than 0.01 cm from a masterpiece standard. Sue Helen examines the magic array composition with a stern, analytical expression, processing the information Popovich just conveyed about Richard's phenomenal advancement. The other mages expressed disbelief, questioning which individual could have produced such a masterwork. They speculate it must originate from a great mage of level 10 or superior, or perhaps a professional rune master, as the academy currently possesses none. With a trace of pride, Teacher Popovich informs the astonished assembly that their conjectures are incorrect, and that the composition emerged from the hands of a mere magic apprentice. The hall erupts in shock and incredulity as the mages refuse to accept that such an immaculate creation could stem from a simple novice. Just as the debate intensifies, their focus is abruptly diverted by a massive commotion emanating from the dormitory sector. A spectacular explosion of magical energy, resembling a brilliant firework, illuminates the nocturnal sky. Originating from the dormitories, the bloom of magic is intensely potent, confirming a significant arcane event is unfolding. Back within his chamber, amidst the swirling energy, Richard triumphantly shouts he has succeeded, despite regulations prohibiting magic use in the dorms late at night. A crazed, triumphant grin spreads across his features as he reveals that after 2 months of training, he can finally employ his ability to perceive the essence of matter, declaring that by harnessing this unique capacity, he has finally drawn the magic that authentically belongs to him, punctuating his achievement with another burst of magical pyrotechnics. Observing from a distance, Sue Helen remarks on the exceptionally beautiful magic fireworks. Popovich confirms without doubt that the energy fluctuation originates from Richard. Sue Helen is thoroughly impressed, noting Richard completed his 3-month assignment a month early and even generated his own magic swifter than most professionals, concluding the child is authentically gifted. With his advancement confirmed, Sue Helen's consideration shifts to a more serious matter. She inquires of Popovich regarding the status of Richard's perilous shadow fluctuation during this interval. Popovich, clasping a luminous orb, reports that while he could perceive the fluctuating aura of the shadow power, he also sensed Richard laboring diligently to actively suppress and govern it. comprehending the situation, Sue Helen determines the moment has arrived for the subsequent phase in his development, time to permit him to commence his own scholastic life. 7 months later, the scene transitions to a grand, towering structure, the Deep Blue Academy within Magic Tower City. It is the inaugural day of the new semester, and an instructor urges the students to hasten their pace. Upon the academy's steps, students are observed rushing to class, anxious to avoid tardiness. A female teacher cautions a student about having credits deducted for lateness. The student halts and states Teacher Popovich dispatched her. The instructor, who was one of the assessors from the entrance examination, pivots and acknowledges the pupil, her expression altering to one of recognition. Her gaze settles upon Richard, who now strides calmly and appears more mature. She addresses him as Student Richard, confirming he is the individual she is to meet. In a brief recollection, the educator recalls observing this same child at the spring of assessment over half a year prior, noting how considerably taller he has grown since that occasion. Popovich is presently conducting Richard on a tour of the academy grounds. He indicates the front courtyard gate and informs Richard he has already organized his lodging within the dormitory. Popovich then gestures toward a substantial edifice, identifying it as the instructional sector where Richard will henceforth attend his classes. They arrive at a classroom. Popovich clarifies that this venue is for Richard's initial magic theory session and reassures him that tardiness is permissible since he is a novice student. Before departing, Popovich exhibits some apprehension, telling Richard to notify him if he feels unaccustomed to anything, considering the age disparity between him and the other pupils. Richard, now appearing more mature and self-assured, turns to his teacher with a composed smile. He reassures Popovich, informing him it is acceptable and that he is more than capable of adequately caring for himself. The scene opens in a grand hall where students of a magic academy are gathered. A buzz of gossip fills the air as they discuss the imminent arrival of a new student rumored to have an insane background and to be very young. The whispers continue and one student reveals the most shocking rumor of all: the new kid is supposedly the legendary mage's newest student. Pan, a student with an eye patch, listens to this with a look of stern disbelief. A teacher wearing a large witch's hat calls for order, telling the students to quiet down as they are delaying class. She announces that today a new student will be joining them, sparking a fresh wave of excitement. The teacher formally introduces the new student, a boy with striking white hair, proclaiming to the class that this is Student Richard. A close-up shows Richard's face with sharp turquoise-colored eyes and a calm, composed expression as the teacher announces that he will be studying with them from now on. One of the students, a girl with pink hair, notes that while Richard is not a small child, he definitely looks younger than the rest of them. She eagerly asks the teacher if the rumor about him being the legendary mage's student is true. The entire class erupts in a wave of shock and disbelief as the idea that this young kid could be the student of the legendary mage seems impossible to them. The students begin to question Richard's qualifications, wondering what makes him so special when countless other powerful, accomplished mages have failed to gain an apprenticeship. The teacher once again has to shout for them to be quiet. The teacher appears flustered by the class's outburst, turning to try and address the rampant speculation. However, before the teacher can speak, Richard addresses the class himself, his voice cutting through the noise. He states clearly that he has never met the legendary mage they speak of. Richard cleverly clarifies his position, stating that he is just another student here to learn magic, and that his current mentor is Teacher Popovich. He formally introduces himself as Richard with a confident, almost mischievous smile. Richard concludes his introduction by saying he looks forward to learning from everyone. Richard's explanation leaves the other students confused. They conclude it must have all been a misunderstanding, wondering how such a young kid could have become the legendary mage's student anyway. Pan, the student with the eye patch, looks particularly annoyed by the whole affair. He grumbles and tells everyone to stop fooling around and pay attention to class. The school bells ring, signaling the end of the day. As the school day ends, students rush out, excited to play a match of magic ball. They make plans to meet at the exercise district, leaving Richard behind in the now empty hallway. Richard reflects on his first day of classes, thinking to himself that it has been a whole day of studying things he already learned in the mirror classroom. With an intense and bored expression, he concludes that the theories and spells were far too basic and uninteresting for him. The scene flashes back. Teacher Popovich informs Richard that he will officially integrate into campus life the following week. Richard questions this, reminding Popovich that his current magical knowledge already far exceeds the scope of ordinary student learning. Popovich acknowledges this fact but explains that Richard's talent is so great that he was already capable of handling the General Magic Academy curriculum 7 months ago. He was kept in the mirror classroom only because his young age and physical immaturity were a concern. Richard asks to just stay where he is, but Popovich refuses. He explains that letting him return to campus life is a decision agreed upon by both himself and the legendary mage, as it will be beneficial for Richard's body and mind. Richard looks frustrated, complaining that everything is decided by this legendary mage, whom he has never even seen. He questions whether she can truly be called his mentor. Popovich gently places a hand on Richard's shoulder, reassuringly telling him of course she can. He says that Richard should be rejoicing to become her student and that he must trust her. With a knowing smile, Popovich assures Richard that all these arrangements are for his own good. He leans in, adding with finality that everything is within the legendary mage's grasp. Returning to the present, Richard walks through the halls, pondering Popovich's words. He questions what he can truly learn this way and resolves to find his own knowledge in the library. His thoughts are abruptly shattered by an angry shout from behind. Richard turns to face his aggressor, his expression calm and his eyes sharp. It is Pan, his face twisted with rage. He lunges forward, throwing a punch while yelling that Richard is a liar. Richard, unfazed, effortlessly dodges the attack. From a balcony above, other students spot the commotion, with one pointing down and shouting about a fight. Richard's swift dodge sends Pan stumbling forward, losing his balance completely from the force of his own missed punch. Pan gets back on his feet, absolutely furious. He cracks his knuckles and yells at Richard, calling him a little brat and demanding to know who he thinks he is, spouting lies. Ironically, Pan himself declares what Richard had denied, shouting that this is the new student of the legendary mage, and revealing his deep-seated jealousy. The two female students who were gossiping earlier watch from a distance, recognizing Richard and realizing he is about to be in big trouble. They discuss the situation, revealing that Pan is a talented level 2 mage who has always held a grudge, because he could never become the legendary mage's student. He had conspired to ostracize Richard, but Richard's public denial of the rumor thwarted his plan, leaving him flustered and angry. Pan confronts Richard again, acknowledging his skill in dodging and angrily questions why Richard will not admit to his status. Meanwhile, two figures watch from a balcony. A woman named Minnie asks her companion Randolph if this is his doing, accusing him of telling the new lackey, level 2 mage Pan, about Richard. Randolph denies that the self-important Pan is his lackey, admitting he just wanted to borrow Pan's ego to test how much the new kid, Richard, weighs. Minnie warns Randolph not to play with fire, reminding him that if Richard gets into any danger, even Randolph, who is also a student of the legendary mage, will be severely punished. Randolph, however, smirks completely unconcerned. Back in the hall, Pan grabs Richard by the collar, screaming in his face, calling him a kid and asking if he is scared, yelling at him to answer and calling him a weakling and a cowering turtle. The scene cuts to a flashback from 7 months ago. It shows Richard's hands wrapped in bandages as he strikes a wooden training dummy, exhausted. A younger Richard complains to teacher Popovich, wondering why they are doing physical training instead of learning magic. Popovich explains that to be a great mage, one needs a strong body as a container for powerful magic. He reminds Richard of his desire to become stronger to protect others, and declares that for the next half year he must undergo devil's training. His resolve hardened by Popovich's words, Richard's eyes burn with determination as he sweats, shouting a firm yes. The grueling training begins. Popovich has Richard focus on strength, forcing him to lift heavy sacks with his body and magic. The training also includes wisdom, showing Richard collapsed on the floor, surrounded by books, a sword, and other training tools after intense study. Finally, the training focuses on physique, with a montage showing Richard relentlessly practicing his combat skills, punching and kicking with incredible force and speed. The flashback ends, returning to the present. The result of that training is now evident. Richard effortlessly catches Pan's hand, stopping his assault. Pan looks on in complete shock. With a cold downward glance, Richard easily overpowers Pan, who can only let out a pained grunt. A look of pure shock and disbelief fills Pan's eyes as he realizes the immense power difference between them. In a swift and powerful motion, Richard lands a devastating kick, sending Pan flying backwards across the hall. The two female students watching from the sidelines are left completely speechless, their mouths agape in astonishment, unable to comprehend the sudden and overwhelming display of power. Even Randolph, who had been watching from the balcony with a confident smirk, is now sweating and speechless at this unexpected turn of events. Richard stands tall, an aura of power emanating from him. He looks down on his defeated opponent and throws his own insult back at him, declaring that Pan is the weakling. Pan lies sprawled on the floor, completely defeated by the physical confrontation. His friends rush to his side, worriedly asking if he is okay, but Pan is far from finished. Utterly humiliated and enraged, he lets out a furious scream. Pushing himself up, Pan begins to channel his magical energy, gathering a ball of intense fire in the palm of his hand. Screaming brat, he unleashes his magic, launching a powerful fireball spelled directly at Richard. He proudly declares his status as a level 2 mage, certain that his magic cannot be defeated. In response, Richard simply raises his hand, calmly preparing a counterspell. His expression is hidden in shadow, showing no sign of fear or strain. Richard unleashes his own magic, a massive swirling vortex of fire. A powerful firestorm erupts from his hand, completely dwarfing and consuming Pan's fireball with ease. From high above, teacher Popovich watches the battle unfold. With a satisfied expression, he confirms that this overwhelming display of power is exactly what he anticipated from his prodigious student. As the massive firestorm rages, one of the onlookers screams out the unbelievable truth of the situation. Richard has just cast level 3 magic, proving he is in a completely different league from the level 2 Papan. The boy scrutinizes a scroll for Fire Cyclone, a level 3 magic spell constituting an area of effect fire assault that also obstructs other magic, a seemingly casual introductory feat for a purported level 1 apprentice. Richard translates theory into practice, casting the incantation with an 87% instantaneous rendering rate, signifying he executes magic with extraordinary rapidity and efficiency, vastly exceeding the norm. Even possessing this exceptional aptitude, Richard murmurs to himself that even with his unique capacity to perceive magic's underlying truth, he can only achieve an 80% autonomous drawing rate. The consequence of his spell becomes evident as the level 3 magic blasts a substantial aperture through a solid stone wall. The onlookers are terrified. Discerning this is not average, quotidian magic, they cannot believe a level 1 freshman employs level 3 magic, an unprecedented accomplishment, until they recall he is the disciple of a legendary mage, which renders the feat a terrifyingly logical outcome. Richard, realizing he has exhibited excessive power, affects nonchalance by remarking he became slightly carried away. As though he merely spilled a beverage, rather than damaged the institution's infrastructure. He even recollects his teacher Popovich explicitly instructing him to avoid exactly this action. However, Randolph, a student donning an oversized wizard hat, notes Richard's formidable strength and elects to instigate conflict. He calls down to his lackey, Pan, and tosses a scroll to him in a blatantly dubious exchange. Pan catches the scroll with an expression of dread. Randolph grins and instructs him to accept it, reminding him of their arrangement, which involves Randolph exploiting his family's sway to secure Pan a position as a student of the legendary mage. Sensing the perilous atmospheric shift, Richard cautions the other students to retreat. They identify the new challenger as Pan, the individual who just received a magical cheat sheet. Pan commences powering up, a swirling vortex of violet energy erupting around him, inciting the crowd to panic over the reckless deployment of prohibited magic upon campus grounds. Richard stands his ground as Pan, brimming with borrowed confidence, delivers a final warning before launching his onslaught, screaming the magic campus existence is no place for a child like Richard. The attack strikes, revealing it is not merely any spell but level 5 magic from a student who minutes prior appeared ordinary. Richard is captured dead center within the overwhelming purple energy, his countenance exhibiting sheer panic as he is entirely engulfed. The spell is identified as magic telekinesis. Pan strains below while Richard is ragdolled midair, a spectacle that stuns even the background characters, who shouted his level 5 magic and question how Pan could possibly wield it. The answer is he cannot. He is merely a conduit, struggling and perspiring, a blindfold concealing his eyes, suggesting he lacks control. The magic's origin is intimated to stem from the school of the legendary mage, the identical power Randolph pledged to gain Pan entry into, now functioning as a painful trial. Randolph observes from the balcony with a smug, infuriating expression, having known precisely what the scroll would accomplish. Meanwhile, Richard is immobilized by the telekinesis, incapable of movement or drawing a magic circle to retaliate, while a piercing auditory drilling invades his cranium, inflicting agonizing torment in a full-blown psychic assault. One of Randolph's goons suggests the lesson concludes, but Randolph, ever the saddest, remains unsatisfied. He states there is no urgency and desires to wait longer, not to impart instruction, but to witness what transpires when something fractures under the relentless strain. His creepy smile returns as he lays out his twisted logic. He wants to see everything Richard is capable of, and if that means driving him completely insane, that would not be bad either. However, Randolph may have pushed too hard. Richard's face is blacked out by a new dark energy, clearly at his breaking point. The telekinesis still affects him, but something else is waking up, something angry. A wave of pure dark energy erupts from Richard. Pan, who is enjoying his power trip, suddenly loses control of his spell as his telekinesis shatters. Pan gets a face full of the dark energy, his expression pure panic as the hunter becomes the hunted. The dark tendrils of energy completely overwhelm the area. From Pan's perspective, he is looking at some kind of eldritch horror as he screams about the energy while Richard floats like a vengeful god. Pan drops to the ground, clutching his head and screaming. On the balcony, even Randolph looks completely shocked, having not expected Richard's own brand of crazy. An instructor arrives on the scene to find Pan rolling on the floor, wailing that his head hurts. The official report cites a fight with reckless use of magic. Another student runs up to the instructor, stating that student Pan has suddenly acted like he has gone mad. In the chaos, Richard has also fainted after unleashing his hidden power. Up on the balcony, Randolph has a temper tantrum, furious that his perfect plan is ruined. He fumes that just a little bit more, and he would have had that brat, revealing he was not trying to win a fight but to break a person. Then his eyes land on the evidence, the magic circle manuscript lying on the floor. His face shifts from angry to panicked as he realizes his connection to the illegal duel is exposed. He quickly conjures wind magic to snatch it, trying to blend in with the crowd by casually stepping on the scroll to pick it up. He is not slick enough. A sharp-eyed female student, Minnie, walks right up to the instructor, holds up the scroll, and says she found the manuscript Pan used, suggesting the magic fight had an instigator. Randolph freezes in terror, caught outplayed by a fellow student. Minnie stands holding the evidence like a queen, knowing exactly what she has done. The scene cuts to a more opulent setting where the legendary mage Sue Helen is getting a report. It confirms a strange energy anomaly drove Pan mad and that only he could see it, indicating it was a mental attack, not a normal one. The analysis speculates that this strange manifestation was Richard's dormant shadow energy piggybacking on the telekinesis spell Pan was using, essentially hijacking the attack and turning it back on the user. Sue Helen agrees with the assessment, stating that Richard has started to use that shadow power, even if unconsciously. She tells Professor Popovich to keep a very close eye on him, as Richard has just become the most interesting and dangerous student in the academy. Professor Popovich confirms that the instigator, Randolph, has already been punished according to Sue Helen's orders. He then asks how they should handle the situation now. A quick glimpse shows Randolph has received a severe whipping. Now in a council meeting with Sue Helen's advisors, one named Xiaowei suggests a brilliant idea for damage control. Since Randolph is the son of a duke, he proposes they kick him out and offer the apprenticeship spots to his two other, less problematic brothers, allowing them to collect enrollment sponsorship fees all over again. This advisor is all about the money, and Sue Helen, from off-screen, agrees that the idea is not bad, showing the legendary mage is equally concerned with the bottom line as they try to make up for losses from last season. However, not everyone is on board, as a stuffy-looking advisor with a monocle is absolutely scandalized. The monocle-wearing advisor protests that this absolutely will not do, arguing that an apprentice status under Her Highness Sharon, Sue Helen's formal title, is too noble and important to be sold off so casually. Xiaohui fires back, arguing that reputation is a problem for the future, but the financial losses are a problem they are facing right now. He makes a fair point, stating he does not want Her Highness to have to take on exhausting side quests just to pay the bills. The monocle-wearing advisor retorts that it was Xiaohui's idea to let Randolph pay his way in to begin with, and that flooding the school with unqualified disciples will ruin their reputation. Before the argument can escalate, Sue Helen interrupts them. She calmly states that while income is the foundation of their city, a tarnished reputation is also a steep price to pay. She declares she is simply prioritizing the most practical interests, which forces her to weigh both sides of this very expensive coin. Sue Helen weighs her options, admitting that the sponsorship money is great for business, but on the other hand, taking in useless rich kids like Randolph is exactly why these messes happen, and it cheapens the brand of her real disciples, a classic dilemma of cash versus quality. Her two advisors, one representing reputation and the other representing profit, look to her for the final decision, asking, "Then, Your Highness, what is your meaning?" The question hangs in the air. Are they going to be a prestigious academy or a diploma mill for rich kids? Sue Helen responds with the biggest, greediest, most sparkly-eyed grin imaginable, giving the only answer a true girl boss can give: she wants it all. She declares that in the adult world, you do not make choices, you just make everyone else miserable until you get your way. She demands that her advisors think of another way that gets the best of both worlds. Her advisors stand speechless as one mutters that her money-loving personality is acting up again. With that settled, she moves on. While Randolph may have planned the whole incident, she is far more interested in Richard. The fact that a level 1 apprentice used a level 3 spell is the real headline. She gives a nod to Professor Popovich, acknowledging that he has taught Richard well. Sue Helen continues to muse on Richard's talent, admitting that even she, a literal legendary mage, could not pull off something like that when she was a beginner. She knows it is not just talent, there is something else, another characteristic driving him. She gets a thoughtful look in her eye, the classic "I'm figuring out the secret" to the protagonist's power look, and she is about to solve the puzzle. The secret is revealed through a flashback to Richard's grueling training over the past year, which was not just about learning magic but a full-on grind covering every aspect, physical, psychological, and more. It is his sheer determined resolve that carries him forward. The source of that resolve is his mother. He reflects that she sacrificed everything to protect him, and in doing so taught him the meaning of becoming a real man. This is his core memory, the heart of his motivation. With that memory burning in his mind, Richard makes a silent, powerful vow: he wants to become stronger, to have the ability to protect the things he wants to protect in the future, the classic protagonist declaration. Back in the present, Sue Helen watches him from afar with a knowing smile on her face, as if she heard his vow from across the campus. "Perhaps," she says, confirming that she understands him completely. She looks out over her city, deep blue, and makes a grand prophecy: Richard is not just going to be some magic rune constructor. No, she believes they are on the verge of producing something legendary, a saint constructor. 1 month later, Richard, now addressed as Student Richard, receives familial visitors who have also brought an abundance of gifts. His intuition tingles, and he immediately perceives this is not a cordial visit, thinking it could not possibly be that individual. A dramatic door opening reveals a long-haired blonde pretty boy exuding a smug aura. Richard's face registers surprise as the visitor, radiating an "I'm superior to your energy," greets him with a casual "long time no see, Richard." Then, with a smirk that could curdle milk, introduces himself as Richard's half-sister. The scene jumps back 3 days to Black Rose Castle. Inside, a shadowy figure swirls wine while receiving news from Deep Blue that Richard has been developing considerably. It is Lord Chant, multitasking, on one hand lamenting some money-grubbing old woman, on the other instructing his subordinate that since Modern is occupied, she must go settle the account and, while there, remain in Tower City. The camera pans to a beautiful blonde woman, Daisy, who implores her lord, stating her mother's illness is worsening, and she wishes to remain by her side. Lord Chant, without even glancing at her, coldly declares her mother is no longer worth squandering time upon. He then launches into a villainous monologue regarding everything for the sake of the Akamon family, citing their motto, individuals devoid of value can only become dust. He commands Daisy to pack her belongings and depart in 2 days. End of discussion. Daisy defeatedly ascended. Lord Chant then reveals the genuine rationale of Richard, being his biological progeny, possesses a unique condition. He has been unconsciously accessing shadow power. Chant's solution is to order Daisy to act as a babysitter and observe Richard intimately, with the additional duty of taking some youth from a fallen noble lineage with her as part of a sinister internship program. Daisy mentions that this other girl has perpetually performed intelligence work, meaning they are dispatching a juvenile spy to surveil another child. Lord Chant could not care less. He simply desires her reintegrated into the fold, asserting the family's bloodline is all that signifies. This entire elaborate, heartless scheme is to prepare Richard for his prospective growth and for perpetuating the familial lineage. Another temporal shift advances 1 entire year into the future. The art style is brighter and the structures more ornate, yet the familial drama persists. A brief shot displays random students lamenting homework, a slice of life indicating that even within this disordered world, people still endure all-nighters. Meanwhile, Daisy sits alone in her luxurious chamber, appearing downcast, a year of this charade having extracted its toll. The new semester is commencing, and the narration observes that their mystery thinker has unwittingly resided at this academy for a year now. She reflects on how swiftly time elapses and how this location suits her better than that gothic nightmare castle. She notes Richard is already beginning his 3rd semester. Her countenance is calm, excessively so, as she muses that Richard is rapidly approaching his 13th birthday. One can practically visualize the gears turning within her mind. She summons a servant who materializes instantly. With a chilling smile, Daisy issues her directive: prepare a meal for young Master Richard. Her internal contemplation reveals the entire scheme. Today is another occasion to nourish his physique. And so, within the hallowed halls of this grand academy, the subsequent phase of the Akamon family's plan officially commences. Inside, Richard is getting his gains in, doing one-handed push-ups to prepare for the new semester. He finishes his set completely wiped, but his rest is cut short by a voice calling his name. It is the unnamed maid, who informs him that his dear sister Daisy is out but leaves instructions for a rich meal. Richard's face shows dread as he thinks, here they go again. The poor guy looks like he is about to face a firing squad. In comes the unnamed maid, leaning in with a sing-song good morning, young Master Richard. Her whole vibe is a little too friendly. Richard has a flashback, monologuing that ever since his half-sister Daisy came to take care of him a year ago, once every week he is subjected to this. The unnamed maid brings him to the table for his special horrifying meal, serving him while getting way up in his personal space and making him blush. He complains in his head that he always has to eat some strange foods. By strange, he means the kind of stuff you would find in a monster's garbage can. First on this nightmare menu is the rib of a Komodo earth dragon, which looks like a rack of spiky burnt death. Next is the eastern deep-sea Atano fish, which looks like it died, was brought back to life as a zombie, and then died again, and it is oozing. To wash it all down, there is Gladiator wine exclusive to some dwarves from Flame Canyon, a mug of something that is literally on fire. Richard just stares at this meal, sweating bullets. A close-up on his eye shows sheer dread. He is so tired of these weird foods. He then starts thinking about this strange servant lady who came with Sister Daisy in her very non-standard skimpy uniform, leaving our boy confused on multiple levels. The unnamed maid snaps him out of it, asking with fake sweetness why he is not eating. She even pouts, asking if her cooking is not good. Richard, panicking, quickly makes an excuse about not having an appetite after exercising, but she is not having it. The unnamed maid draws closer, insisting the meal contains ingredients for a strengthening potion and that she must ensure he consumes it. She then offers to feed him directly. Richard frantically refuses, but she maintains pressure, citing a fabricated proverb about dragons requiring a large appetite, engaging in psychological warfare through the unpalatable food. She concludes by expressing her dedication and hope for him to eat happily, her smile unnaturally plastic. As a final gesture, she leans in with artificial sparkles and whispers that she can use her everything to serve the young master. Overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, Richard begins cramming the spiky dragon ribs into his mouth as if his life depends on it. The effect is immediate and violent. He keels over, shouting that his entire body is on fire. The maid feigns shock and concern, crying out for the young master as he becomes delirious, his face tomato, red with steam escaping his mouth as he mutters about intense heat and dizziness. The strengthening potion's effects hit him with freight train force. The maid's facade of concern melts into cold, predatory calculation. A sly look crosses her face as she internally notes she may have added too much seasoning, or perhaps, after a year of consumption, the effects are finally manifesting. She decides the time has come to help him relieve the built-up energy. Richard awakens later, confused and flushed, within a bathtub filled with glowing water. He struggles to assemble his recollections of consuming a meal, experiencing dizziness, and then oblivion, realizing he has been drugged. The maid's voice penetrates the steam. falsely observing that he appears to have calmed down, though Richard is anything but tranquil. He screams in panic, demanding to know why she is also present. She replies with an expression of intense focus, stating she must take excellent care of him, and reveals the special meal was a recipe intended exclusively for males. Having endured sufficient bewilderment, Richard scrambles from the tub in a frantic escape attempt. She protests that his physique has not yet stabilized, cautioning him to be careful, and true to form he trips in a classic stumble, collapsing directly atop her. She gazes up at him, blushing, and whispers, "Master." Richard is utterly confused, processing the circumstance with visible horror, before blurting out an apology. Contrary to his expectations, she calmly states it is acceptable, appearing more than acquiescent to the situation. With a peculiar intensity, she declares she has perpetually awaited this moment, seizing him and revealing the fall was less accidental than it appeared. She explains the special sustenance has been accumulating within his system and that she now belongs to him, implying the meal functioned as both an aphrodisiac and a loyalty elixir. As the complete effects overpower him, Richard slips weakly to the floor, drained of all vigor. She kneels before him and offers assistance, stating it is permissible as the scene shifts suggestively. She claims her divine purpose is to serve and aid him in calming down, initiating a process to that effect. Gazing up at him, she reveals this entire ordeal constituted her assigned mission, a scheme that necessitates context from her past. A flashback discloses she is a descendant of a noble lineage that supported the losing faction in a political coup. Her perceived destiny was a lifetime of servitude, fulfilling another's will until she was ultimately surrendered to the Akamond family. Lord Chant looms over her, proclaiming her entire existence now belongs to them, returning to the present. She continues speaking of her mission as a sacred duty to perpetuate the Akamond bloodline, her perspective molded by years of indoctrination. Richard, however, ceases listening to her words. He perceives beyond her conditioning flashbacks of his own cold family dehumanizing his mother, Elaine surfacing within his mind. Something profound within him fractures. He seizes her arm, abruptly halting her actions. She is wholly taken by surprise, her ingrained programming faltering. Richard then roars with furious conviction that she is not a slave. Another recollection of his mother's compassionate countenance and teachings saturates his thoughts. He channels her wisdom, proclaiming one should not judge status as elevated or inferior, that every individual possesses their own distinct path and guiding stars. He asserts she is not that man's instrument. With his final declaration, "You are just you," the psychological chains encircling her heart disintegrate. In that pivotal moment, he restores her identity to her. They are no longer master and servant, but simply two people. Tears stream down her face as she kisses him upon the cheek and thanks him, employing his given name Richard, not Master. After this potent, chain-shattering pronouncement, the emotional toll overwhelms Richard, and he faints completely, his eyes swirling and a nosebleed evident. She catches him wearing a soft, unsurprised smile, remarking internally that he has lost consciousness again. Cradling his slumbering visage, she reflects on how he fought for her only to promptly collapse. His words echo within her mind, overriding years of indoctrination. Everyone has their own path and stars. She is merely herself. With newfound resolve, she forges a fresh vow, not to the Akamond family or a master, but to him alone. She internally affirms her name is Aaron and expresses authentic happiness regarding the decision to serve young Master Richard. Her service is no longer a chain, but a conscious, deliberate choice. And that's how you turn a messy family tree into a full-on forest fire. Richard's just getting started, and honestly, we're not ready. Want part 2? Drop the word elf in the comments. Yes, like his mom. No, she's not replying like, share and subscribe, or Richard might accidentally blast your DMs. See you in part 2 if you remember the secret word.